Hello. Today I'm going to briefly talk about a book that I published on Amazon, but it can be downloaded completely for free from Matthew2414.com, called Ellen White's Life Quick Overview. Um, Ellen White being one of the key co-founders of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Okay, so there's different sections here: personal life, family, visions and dreams, travel, church leadership, and publications. And she was born in 1827, um, and to her father, Robert and Eunice. At 9 years old, she had a facial injury, which was very severe, curtailing her education. 1840 and 1842, she attended Millerite meetings from William Miller, who was expecting Jesus to return in 1843 to 1844. And she was baptized in 1842 by immersion, and her family were expelled in 1843 for their beliefs in William Miller and the Millerite movement. In 1844, there was a great disappointment when Jesus didn't return to Earth as it was anticipated. And in 1846, she began keeping the Saturday Sabbath. And here's a picture of her two surviving sons and her husband, two died, one in infancy and one as a teenager. She gave up eating meat, and in 1915 she had an accident, and then died later that year. Okay, and being a famous person, she also had multiple funerals. Okay, so as mentioned, her parents were Robert and Eunice Harmon, and she probably met her husband in 1845. This is one of the oldest, or the oldest, perhaps, photos of her and her husband. And it wasn't the first time she met him. They met briefly before. She married him in 1846. Her first son, who died of pneumonia at 16, was born in 1847, and the second son in 1849, who was survived. Her third son, Willie White, who was kind of her great assistant during her life, he was born in 1854, and they had a baby who didn't survive past infancy. James White had poor health, a lot of it due to overwork, and he had a stroke in 1865, and he eventually died in 1881. Okay, so she had a twin sister as well, whose name was Elizabeth, or Lizzie, and one of her famous relatives was Arthur L. White in Seventh-day Adventist Church, and who wrote a lot about her and her life. Okay, Ellen White, Seventh-day Adventists believe, had visions, the first one being in 1844, regarding a narrow path, and sort of giving hope to those after the great disappointment when Jesus didn't return. And in 1845, she held up a large family Bible whilst in vision for 20 to 30 minutes, which was, approximately, which was, impossible for most people. And she was a very weak individual, so it would have been, completely unheard of that someone could do that. She had a vision of the heavenly sanctuary where Seventh-day Adventists believe that Jesus went in 1844. This was the 1847 vision. And she had a vision about publishing in 1848. And her husband published a periodical following that. She had the Great Controversy vision between good and evil, etc., in 1858. There was a vision of the Civil War in 1861 that was anticipated by her. She had her first major health vision was in 1863, and during her life, she had a lot of interactions with people, guided by God, and one of them was a vision about secret society involvement from someone called Mr. Fulkhead, in Australia. And he ended up accepting her information and so on, and changed his life, and moved away from the secret societies, etc. In 1893, she had a dream about her son Edson nearly drowning, who kind of rebelled during his life, but then did come back to working a lot. And I believe he set up a boat called the Morning Star, reaching African Americans. In 1902, she had warnings about Battle Creek Publishing for visions, and there was eventually fire, which struck, burning it to the ground. Okay, so she moved in 1852 to Rochester, New York. In 1854, she was saved from a train wreck after fortunately moving further back and saving their lives, essentially. Injury, if not saving their lives. And this is a picture of her husband and her surviving sons. In 1855, she moved to Battle Creek. And in 1855, moved to Battle Creek. 1885, traveled to Europe. 1885, first visited Britain. 1886, she was sightseeing in France. 1891, she traveled to Australia. So she really, obviously this is well before planes, etc. So it was kind of a lot of work that she did. 1891 and 93, she also visited New Zealand. And in 1900, she permanently returned to North America. And in 1900, again, she moved to Elmshaven, which was her final home. Okay, so she was very involved in leadership, for example, reclaiming key leaders, Loughborough and Andrews, etc. in a perilous journey. She was strongly opposed to slavery. She attended the first camp meeting in 1866. There was Goodloe Harper Bell, who was in education, who she encouraged. She restored, for example, in 1885, a failing congregation in Norway. 1886, dedicated the first Adventist church, which was in Switzerland. I believe in this photo you can see her in the middle center left slightly. She was 1888, she advocated righteousness by faith, which was a big challenge for some people in the Seventh Adventist Church. 1891, she appealed for outreach to African Americans in the America's South. 1901 called for general conference reorganization in terms of the structure of the church, the hierarchy. And she was a very generous donor and philanthropist, giving away a lot of money and assisting a lot of people. Okay, and in terms of publication, the first book that she wrote in, which was combined with James White, her husband, and Joseph Bates, was A Word to a Little Flock in 1847. And the first independent book was 1851, a sketch of the Christian experiences and views of Ellen G. White. And 1890, published Patriarchs and Prophets, which is one of her key books, and Steps of Christ, which I'm not sure offhand, but possibly is the most published book in 1892. There's millions of many books, so it's kind of perhaps a little bit hard to gauge, but anyway. In 1898, published The Desire of Ages. 1900, published Christ's Object Lessons, which is a very popular book as well, and about Jesus' teachings. 1905, published The Ministry of Healing for physical and spiritual health, and published Acts of the Apostles in 1911, and published The Great Controversy, which is again an extremely famous book from her. In terms of sort of the timeline of Eden and so on to restoration. Okay, and in 1917, posthumously published Prophets and Kings. Okay, so I hope that's of interest, and please feel welcome to download this book from Matthew2414.com.